think it's the responsibility of open source foundations to do this type of education, or do you think that it's a broader responsibility than that?
No, well, okay. So for 20, we have 20 years to recover, at least 20 years to recover. Too much time, for too long, the emphasis has been on licenses only. If it's licensed with, if the package is licensed with an open source approved license, then it's an open source package. Yes, and there is more. There is more, because from the license, we need to talk about business models. We need to talk about governance of projects. We need to talk about responsibilities that you have towards society, towards other developers, and all of that is interconnected. That piece of complexity, I think, has been lost, and many engineers who have they've been running without thinking about the responsibilities, without thinking about the quality of the product that they were releasing, or being forced to release quickly by some other obscure force. I'm not blaming developers in general, but there is push to deliver quickly, get a new feature out without thinking too much. So everyone has been assembling without assembling components, and without paying attention to the guy in Nebraska, right? And his needs or their needs. I think we need to seriously rethink, and I'm starting to get the sense that the CRA is forcing our hand. The CRA, the executive order on cybersecurity in the United States, all of this pressure is bringing that come to Jesus moment, right? We're going to have that conversation, and the role of the foundation, I think, is crucial, because of being a place where knowledge is embedded into their governance, into the people who work there, and then can spread out to the contributors.
Yeah, it's an interesting being inside of large organizations that are analyzing the open source that's coming in, and the importance of something being defined by the open source initiative as being open source with the various principles of open. For a lot of organizations, it's the case that that's the difference between being able to do something as a developer or developer team and having to go engage sourcing, right? Or whatever your procurement organization is that has to go through the contractual, right? And it's very much a step function, right? You're either open source, and so you know what you're going to be able to do with that software and what obligations, right? I mean, certainly, there's every open source program office has a tie to their internal legal counsel and their IP legal counsel as to what can and can't be done and how you want to do that. But when it's not open source, regardless of the new license or a traditional commercial license, it does trip over to sourcing, and so that's always very much a step function. And I think it gets even substantially more convoluted when we start having organizations using either the Affero GPL or using the business source license or what have you, and then adding these added caveats in a blog post that say, well, the license says this, but if you're doing this, that, or the other thing, it's actually okay with us, because those are the types of things that just muddy the waters even worse, right? Because then you can't even, you don't know from one management, all it takes is a new management to say, well, that blog post, we didn't really mean that. So we actually really do want to do what the license says. And that just creates all this confusion, right? And so, and it's confusing between, is this a sourcing thing? Do we need to just go commercial license and not have to deal with this ambiguity, or is it an open source? I mean, how do you see those evolutions and how it's affecting the collaborative communities that actually, are the basis of open source?
It's bad, right? It's bad. I understand their needs. I understand their fear. I understand even at the generational level. Like sometimes I speak to, I'm with these AI conversations. I'm engaging with a lot of groups that are not developers. They come from other spaces, from the open knowledge or open science, open data, or not open at all. They're the Civil Liberties Union and other groups, and I've noticed a lot of the resistance against the big tech companies. Like when when we started, when the open source started in 20 years ago, and the big promoter was Google, and it was a good thing. Like Google at the time was a savior. They were the bastion against Microsoft, against Oracle. They were helping. They understood open source. They were adopting it, and they were deploying it at scale, and we were all excited about it. And forward 20 years ago, the initial ones, they're millionaires, billionaires, and generationally, we also know. I mean, we also have noticed that the divide, the gap between the haves and the have-nots has expanded. There is less of this, the middle class, and all of this to me resonates as one possible explanation of this reluctance of this hate against whatever favors Google, whatever favors Bezos and Amazon, as a resistance, right? This may not be the case for Sentry or for Elastic or any of these other companies but I can see a trend in here. There is a trend of resistance against the big corporations because they've been exploiting the labor, the work of many people. So maybe I'm bundling two different things into one group, but the end result is the same. There is resistance against the big tech corporations, and as my role is quite difficult in these cases because I understand the reasons for the hate. I understand, and I even find it justifiable. But at the same time, I know that the solution is not to change the open source definition, to add new licenses with these obstacles, because that will create the counter effect. Like it would make the large corporation even more powerful because they can afford to have legal processes go through the legal process. They can afford to rewrite some of the code, or even maintain a fork. They have. I mean, I talk about this with the data people quite a lot because there is a whole group of creators who are saying, well, I'm not going to give you permission to use my pictures or my art, my writing anymore because I don't want to be exploited by Microsoft. And my reaction is, well, if you insist on expanding the scope and the reach of copyright to cover data mining, what you're implicitly saying is you're giving your 30 years of history is only proprietary to the companies that already have accumulated that. So the Google, the Microsoft, the Getty Images, the Adobe, and all the others, because they have we gave, as a society, we gave them all of our content, and now we're stuck.
Yeah, it's a complex world. You sit in a very interesting position.
Yeah, well, I find it fascinating. I'm having fun navigating these conversations. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I too can appreciate the situation that the smaller companies are in with exploits is probably a reasonable word. Just the ability for the large tech companies to use those innovative services and turn them into, again, something that can be monetized on their platforms.